Welcome back, everyone. I'm Aric from Rare Candy, and today we're going to be checking out my first post-rotation deck profile for debatably the most hyped new card, or at least the most hyped new attacker from Evolving Skies, and that is going to be Rayquaza VMAX. And this is actually the same list that I posted early for our patrons this past week over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg. So if you guys aren't already a patron, I don't know what you're waiting on. We have a bunch of cool early access and exclusive content over there. And support just genuinely goes back in the channel and really does help out a lot. Or if you guys want an easier way at showing your support, you guys can always just crush that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. That way you'll be up to date whenever my next Evolving Skies video drops. But anyways, in the case of Rayquaza VMAX, let's check out the deck and see what we got going on here. So we have 4 copies of Rayquaza V up first, and there are actually a few things about Rayquaza V that are worth highlighting, unlike a lot of the VMAX pre-evolutions that we tend to get. So Rayquaza V has 2 different attacks. The first one for a Lightning Energy does 40, and you discard the top 2 cards of your deck. Not a particularly great attack. Sometimes the discarding 2 might get some energy in your discard pile, but really the attack that's a little bit more interesting is the second one. For a Fire and Lightning, you can discard either 2 Lightning or 2 Fire energy and do 80 for each one that you discard. So you can do 180 with this attack, which is actually kind of a decent number. 2 shots Pokemon VMAX, but also you can one-shot things like Crobat V, Eldegoss V, etc. So sometimes actually this second attack can be useful if you can't quite find your VMAX. But of course, the star of the show is going to be Rayquaza VMAX. So both these are Rapid Strike cards. Not that that matters too much really for this deck, but Rayquaza VMAX has 320 HP, 0 weakness, resistance, and a 2 retreat cost. But it has this ability: you can discard your hand, draw 3 cards, and then its only attack, actually very similar to the base form Rayquaza V's attack. It's the same attack, but there's no limit to how many energies you can discard. So 80 for every Lightning or Fire that we choose to discard. However, of course, for this deck, we are choosing to go, a little bit more all in on discarding Lightning Energy, needless to say. So in theory, if we discard 4 Lightning Energy, that's 320 plus 20 base damage from this attack, which means we can do 340, knocking out any VMAX in the format, excluding if they have a big charm or some other way at reducing damage against our Rayquaza. But obviously the big downside to this attack is that we have to discard our energies every time we want to use it. But luckily, Evolving Skies is giving Rayquaza VMAX a really good partner to help us out with that. And that's going to be Flaaffy, but we are choosing to play 4 copies of Mareep. And I briefly do want to highlight, I think you guys probably should be playing the Chilling Rain Mareep like I'm playing here. And mainly the reason for that is that it has 70 HP compared to the 60 HP Mareeps that we have. And that is actually relevant against things like Rapid Strike Urshifu, because if you open Mareep and you're going first, on their turn, they can just attach a Fighting Energy, knock you out immediately. Whereas this one has 70, and it's going to prevent those easy KOs a little bit more often. But of course, we also have 4 copies of Flaaffy, which is going to be the main way we are going to be powering up our Rayquaza VMAX. So Flaaffy has the Dynamotor ability. We can attach a Lightning Energy from discard to one of our benched Pokemon. So yeah, we've seen this ability throughout the years, and actually in a very similar old Rayquaza deck too. This is basically just like the old Rayquaza EX electric deck all the way back from like the 2012 era of the game. So you guys can see the strategy here. We're going to nuke whatever our opponent has in play, discard our energy the next turn, find a way to get our Rayquaza on the bench, and charge it back up with Dynamotor yet again. And the only other Pokemon we're playing in this list is going to be 1 copy of Crobat V, just to be able to bail us out of a dead hand if we do decide to. Now, due to the amount of switching cards that we're playing in this deck, I actually think you could play something like Kricketune V in this list if you wanted to as well. However, for this list, I am choosing to play Crobat, as I think it can be a little bit more beneficial in the early game. And I think that's really the turns that Rayquaza struggles with the most in my experience, is just making sure you can get your basics into play in the early turns. So Crobat's going to usually help us out a little bit more with that. And that's why I am choosing that one for the moment. Next up, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research. Discard our hand, draw 7 cards. So yeah, makes sense. We want Lightning Energy in the discard pile to get out with Flaaffy. So between Professor's Research and our Rayquaza VMAX, we should be able to keep dumping our hand and pitch away those Lightning Energies when we do need them. We also have one copy of Marnie as well. This is our only other draw supporter in the deck. So Marnie, of course, will allow us to refresh our hand and only get 5 cards, but we don't have to discard our hand. And also we can disrupt our opponent in the process as well with it. And the reason we're not playing a high draw supporter count is because, of course, we have to remember not only can Rayquaza VMAX just nuke anything in its path, but also it has a good ability. So in the mid to late game, once you've gotten, 2 or 3 of these in play, you don't need physical draw supporters as frequently as most decks out there. Up next, we have 2 copies of Rose, and this might even be the first time Rose has like genuine use in the game now that we have Rayquaza. But Rose says attach up 2 basic energies from your discard to one of your Pokemon VMAX, but then you have to discard your hand. So yeah, that can be a little bit annoying in most decks, but luckily Rayquaza has that great ability that does allow us to discard our hand and draw 3 cards. So we can always bail ourselves out of that dead hand that Rose puts us into, but this can be really good, especially to help cobble together a knockout sort of out of nowhere. Or maybe if your opponent targets down your Flaaffies, Rose will allow you another way at getting some additional energies on your Rayquaza in a turn as well, and can just in the late game set you up to take a big KO out of nowhere. And then up next from there to round out our supporters, we have 2 copies of Boss's Orders just to choose what we want to take knockouts on. Of course, this does look a little bit lower than what most decks will play. I think most people would like a 3rd copy, but unfortunately space is just really tight in this deck, guys. But luckily we do play a POW pad, which I'll point out later in this deck profile, and that can allow us to reuse Boss. For our stadium, we are choosing to play 3 copies of Stormy Mountains, new stadium card that we are getting in Evolving Skies, but allows us to search our deck for either a basic lightning Pokemon or basic dragon Pokemon and put it on our bench. So like I mentioned earlier, the early stages of this game are really where it can be the sketchiest for Rayquaza, and we need to run a ton of Pokemon search cards to be able to ensure that we can set up 2 to 3 Mareep turn 1 and a couple of Rayquaza in the process as well. And not only that, but this can also be a good counter stadium because Path to the Peak I think is a card that is very annoying for us. So being able to have a good stadium that can counteract that is also really solid. Getting into our items, we have 4 copies of Quick Ball. Definitely, I think, one of the best ball search cards we have for this deck. We discard a card from hand, ideally a Lightning Energy, and search our deck for any basic Pokemon. We have 4 copies of Level Ball to search our deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP, so essentially just to find our entire Flaaffy line. From there, 3 copies of Evolution Incense to find our evolutions. Up next, we do have a copy of Ordinary Rod just to give ourselves some recovery options. Most of our draw power in this deck is focused on discarding, whether it be Professor's Research or Rayquaza VMAX's ability. Sometimes we might have to pitch away some extra evolutions that we might not want to, so Ordinary Rod can be good at getting this back, and also getting back fire energies, which we don't play too many of in this list either. Speaking of recovery cards, we do have a copy of POW pad as well. Like I mentioned earlier, we can shuffle 2 supporters from our discard back into our deck. So again, like I mentioned, we do have a lot of discarding effects in this deck, and sometimes we might have to pitch away some of these important supporters like Rose and Boss's Orders in the early game just to get set up, and having POW pad to get those back can be really nice. And truth be told, I wanted a 3rd Rose and a 3rd Boss in the deck, so I'm kind of splitting the difference, and I think POW pad kind of will allow you to have your cake and eat it too in that regards, because you can technically get back one of either supporter if you choose to. We also have 3 copies of Switch in the deck. We are reliant on being on the bench to accelerate our energy to our Rayquazas, so we do need a decent amount of switching cards in this deck to make sure that we can always power up who we want to. But we also have 2 copies of Air Balloon in the deck as well to reduce our retreat cost by 2. So luckily everything in the deck, including our attackers, has a 2 retreat or less, so this can be really nice. So if something gets knocked out, we can promote maybe a Flaaffy with an Air Balloon, accelerate energy on the bench, and then get attacking. And truth be told, I actually really would like a 6th switching card, whether it's a 4th switch or a 3rd Air Balloon. I'm not sure what I would cut just yet, but that is among one of the cards I'm kind of eyeing down maybe in future iterations of this list. And then from there, to round out our trainer cards, we have 2 copies of Energy Search in the deck as well. Since we do have to remember Energy Spinner is going to be rotating, this is going to be our next best thing for the deck. So we can search our deck for a basic energy, put it into hand, shuffle our deck. The reason we're playing this is because we have 2 different types of basic energies, and one of them we're only playing 3 copies of. So instead of playing additional copies of fire energies, we can just play extra copies of Energy Search, because this can help us find fires when we need them. And also, if we already have our fire energy in play, we can get lightning energies maybe in the late game instead. And speaking of energy, we have 3 copies of Fire Energy, as I said. I know that does not look like a lot, guys, but you do have to remember we have the 2 copies of Rose and the 1 copy of Ordinary Rod. And really, we're only going to be able to attack with 2 Rayquazas in a game. So actually, even the 3rd copy doesn't even come into play all the time. So yeah, between these and the energy searches and our recovery options, I think this is kind of the sweet spot that I've found for this deck so far. But from there, we also have 3, 6, 8 copies of Lightning Energy in total. I think that's a solid number. You could maybe even cut 1. I do think that's maybe up for debate, just because Flaaffys are going to be just recycling the same ones over and over anyways. But I think it's a good number to ensure that you can find them in the early game. And between that and energy searches, I think we will have plenty of Lightning Energy throughout the course of a game with this deck. So that's going to be the deck. As you guys can see, I've kind of gone all in on just pure consistency with this Rayquaza VMAX deck. In some of my earlier drafts of the deck, I actually did have some other like tech cards and, you know, luxury cards, I would consider them. But as I kept testing this deck, I just kept finding that I wanted more and more consistency cards just to make sure the deck could get set up, since I think that is kind of this deck's challenge. So that's kind of the route I've decided to go. And I think as a result, this is going to be, you know, dare I even say, one of the most consistent Rayquaza VMAX lists that you're going to find for the post-rotation format just yet. I do feel pretty confident in saying that. And if you guys are thinking about picking up any cards for this deck or any other cards for the post-rotation format, you guys can check out our friends at flipsidegaming.com. We have a coupon code with them, Rare Candy, that you can punch in at checkout to save yourself some money. And all of our patrons actually have their own exclusive discount code for even bigger savings there too. Or alternatively, you guys can check out our friends at tcgplayer.com if Flipside is out of stock of what you're looking for, or maybe you're just a little bit more familiar with TCG Player. I have an affiliate link down below in the description you guys can use. And even though there's no discount code attached to it, the way TCG Player works is that they pull prices from all over the web to ensure that you always get the cheapest price at any given point for the cards that you're going to be picking up. But that is going to wrap up today's video, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think this deck is going to be good? Do you think it's all hype? Are there any changes you would think about making to this list? Let me know down below in the comment section. Really want to hear what the community is thinking about this archetype. But I've actually got a ton more Evolving Skies content being worked on right now, so make sure you guys do like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. That way you'll stay up to date whenever my next video drops. Or another way you can show your support for the channel is by becoming a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or pick up some merch over at rarecandytcg.com. Any support you guys give is always massively appreciated. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.